Hello, everyone. My name is Pradeep Nayak, and I am joining you from the University of Waterloo in Canada. And I'm also representing here the Vulnerability to Viability Global Partnership for Building Small-Scale Fisheries. I'll be the moderator for the webinar today. Thanks for joining. And I will do a few rounds of introductions before I invite our speaker today to speak. So, just as if first, introduction to the Vulnerability to Viability Global Partnership. It is a global network of transdisciplinary research, knowledge, and action, and acts as a network with over 100 members from Africa, Asia, and internationally. The goal of the global partnership is to support small-scale fisheries in their transition from vulnerability to viability. And the way we understand and use this transition from vulnerability to viability is not just to represent or focus on the economics or incomes of the small-scale fisheries communities, but also to look at all aspects of small-scale fisheries communities' life. That includes the political, the cultural, the ecological, and other aspects that are important to their existence. Our focus is fourfold. First, we are working with multi-level institutions and communities, of small-scale fisheries to co-create and co-produce knowledge that is effective in, facilitating the transition. The second is to create a database or information system where to hold this knowledge. Therefore, it can be used by multiple stakeholders. The third is to develop the transdisciplinary capacity, which is transdisciplinary capacity, which is important in the work of transitioning from vulnerability to viability. And the fourth is to synthesize, integrate, and analyze the information or the knowledge, co-produced knowledge, in a way that it informs governance and policy and practice. The V2V Global Partnership aims to identify the diverse factors and conditions contributing to the vulnerability of small-scale fisheries and engage collaboratively with small-scale fisher communities and other key NGO, government, and university partners to enhance small-scale fisheries viability. We are conducting transdisciplinary community-engaged research in 6 countries of Africa that include, in Asia, that includes Bangladesh, India, Indonesia, Japan, Malaysia, and Thailand, and 6 countries in Africa that includes Ghana, Malawi, Nigeria, Senegal, South Africa, and Tanzania. In doing so, the V2V Global Partnership brings people and organizations together across physical, cultural, and disciplinary boundaries through a shared interest in addressing global change impacts on small-scale fisheries, but also, small resource-dependent communities around the world. The B2B thematic webinar series, for which we have gathered here virtually today, is a series and an initiative of the V2B Global Partnership to facilitate and generate high-level discussions and on vulnerability and viability themes and topics within the context of small-scale fisheries and coastal communities. The goal is to feature academics, representatives of governments and intergovernmental organizations, practitioners, and members of the civil society who have made significant contributions to the theoretical, practical, and policy aspects of coastal communities and small-scale fisheries, both locally and globally. The V2V thematic webinar series takes place on the last Friday of every month. Of course, in December, we are in holidays, so therefore it is earlier than the last Friday, which is today, and it will continue to be so in the next year, which is 2024. The series is available internationally through live streaming on YouTube. Details regarding the monthly webinar, including speakers, topics, and titles, And links to the webinar platform, which is live stream on YouTube, is available on our webpage, which is www.b2bglobalpartnership.org. Today's webinar is the 12th in the series of B2B thematic webinars planned for the year 2023, and happens to be the last seminar in 2023, but we'll start a new series in 2024. And the 36th since January 2021, when we started this thematic webinar series. And it is my privilege to introduce Advocate Hafij Khan as our distinguished speaker today. Advocate Hafij Khan is an internationally acclaimed environmental lawyer who is active both at the grassroots as well as global levels. And you will hear a lot of those examples from his talk today. For the last 20 years, Advocate Khan has been working with vulnerable communities in Bangladesh, representing their voice in ensuring climate justice and environmental rights. He is also a climate change negotiator and currently acting as the co-coordinator of the 46 least developing countries at the UNFCCC. Advocate Hafij Khan is currently serving as the member of the executive committee of the Warsaw International Mechanism for Loss and Damage at the UNFCCC, associated with the adverse effects of climate change, the loss and damage process itself. In the past, he also acted as a member of the Transitional Committee for Loss and Damage Fund and worked as an advisor to the LDC's members at the Transitional Committee throughout the year 2023. Hafij is also a PhD candidate and an affiliated researcher with the B2B Global Partnership in the Faculty of Environment, University of Waterloo in Canada. It is my honor to invite Advocate Hafij Khan to deliver today's talk for the B2B thematic webinar series for December 2023. And the talk by Hafij is titled as COP28 Outcomes, which just happened in Dubai a week back, financing to address ecological loss and damage. Over to you, Hafij, and thank you for making the time to make this webinar talk. Over to you for the presentation.
Thank you, Professor Pratip, so much for your warm introduction. But distinguished participants, I would be really happy to introduce myself, simply a community lawyer, because I'm working with the vulnerable communities last 20 years. Even I'm now drafting the international policies. With that said, I was hearing very carefully, Professor Pratip. He talked about the transformation, transition between vulnerability to viability. So this is the current state of international policies, that we all are thinking for a transition. That is just transition. So just transition does not only comply with the energy transition, that is also imply with this sort of transformation, vulnerability to viability. So at the outset, I would like to thank Professor Pratibha again to invite me. It is my honor and privilege to talk about your project, and also in related ecological loss and damage. And of course, my focus would be the COP28. So distinguished participants, thanks again. Let me look at the issues of loss and damage actually. Loss and damage is now reality, because we did not take adequate mitigation and adaptation efforts. Loss and damage is now the reality. If you look at the IPCC 6th assessment report, it's clearly stated that vulnerable communities and the states are facing economic and non-economic loss and damage. Those are associated with slow onset process and also sudden onset events. Slow onset process, for example, sea level rise and associated saline water intrusion, desertification. And in terms of sudden onset events, cyclones, floods, And now, colleagues, you see all these impacts and vulnerabilities resulting to some extent economic or non-economic loss and damage. And for me, I think its most important and critical issue is damage to ecosystem. Colleagues, we all know that ecosystem service supports our lives, of course, livelihood. And if the ecological damage is critical, complex to address, then we need to take some sort of innovative institutional approach. Right tools and methodologies needs to be identified. Right tools and methodologies needs to be used to assess the impacts and to identify the right approaches. Community participation is critical. At the same time, indigenous and local knowledge would be very worthy. So, for example, if we lose our ecosystem due to saline water intrusion or due to storm surges associated with tropical cyclones, so all that cause harm to the agro ecosystems that results and threaten us our food security. And as a result, due to changing ecology, they are losing their traditional livelihoods, and due to losing traditional livelihood, that also forced him to displaced. So, my colleagues, you see the complexity around with the ecological loss and damage. So that's why, again, if we look at the IPCC sixth assessment report, that clearly stated that we need to develop effective institutional structures that can meet the needs of vulnerable communities efficiently. So you see, IPCC 6 assessment report recognized the institutional structure. So colleagues, today my focus would be mostly COP28 outcomes, but if we all on a sudden talk about the COP20 outcomes, it would be really critical to understand to some extent. That's why I would like to go back a little bit so that it can provide some background context to understand the loss and damage. And of course, my focus would be identify the scope for financing, particularly ecological loss and damage. And in terms of way forward, maybe we can think about some innovative ideas that could be utilized by the policymakers or other relevant stakeholders. Colleagues, in terms of technology, Maha is kindly helping me. Maha, may I request you to change the slide? Thank you so much, Maha. So colleagues, you see a graph. If we look at the current state of global governance structure for loss and damage, of course, United Nations Framework Convention, that is the mother legal or policy instrument. Under this convention, we established a Warsaw International Mechanism back in 2013 at COP19. So under this the international mechanism we established with a broader perception that it will be a comprehensive institute that can deliver the needs of the vulnerable communities in terms of addressing loss and damage. So after this Warsaw International Mechanism was established, firstly, there is an executive committee is established to deliver the functions of this international mechanism. Currently, there are 20 members, 10 members for developed country and 10 members from developing countries. These 20 members of the executive committee, in collaboration with 5 other expert groups, are working at this moment, particularly to take action at the ground level and with supports needed. So executive committee at this moment developing some sort of tools and methodologies to assess the needs of the communities, to assess the financial needs for addressing loss and damage, to assess the nature of loss and damage, also to identify the right approaches. So at this moment, executive committee is developing these tools and methodologies that would be really useful for country level so that vulnerable countries can immediately start to assess the needs need assessment is the first and foremost. So executive committee at this moment developing this that would be useful for country level. Secondly, parties of the convention and the Paris Agreement agreed to establish another institute that is called Santiago Network that intends to catalyze the technical assistance to the vulnerable communities and the states. So you see, executive committee is acting as a policy arm. On the other hand, this Santiago network is considered as a technical arm of the international mechanism. So this Santiago network is going to provide the technical assistance. Thirdly, if we see the fund and funding arrangement, that is the financial arm of this Warsaw International Mechanism. So this fund will provide the relevant resources, financial resources to meet the needs of the communities. So broadly, if we look at this Warsaw International Mechanism, it has now three wings. One is the policy arm, that is the executive committee. Second, the Santiago network, that is the technical arm. Third, the fund is the financial arm. So you see, more than a decade, we established this Warsaw International Mechanism. Now we got a comprehensive institutional structure agreed at the COP28. That's why COP28 actually very important momentum for this loss and damage global regime. So the distinguished participants who are listening to me, I'm very happy to share with you that I'm acting as an executive committee member of this mechanism. And I also acted as a transitional committee member for Loss and Damage Fund and funding arrangement for the short time. However, throughout the year as an advisor to LDC Transitional Committee. So, colleagues, why I'm telling this actually, I would like to express you some negotiation, momentums, political issues was involved there. So, as a negotiator, I would like to talk about the COP28 particularly. Maha, would you please give me the next slide? Maha, thanks. So basically, I would like to talk about the loss and damage fund and funding arrangement. That was agreed at the COP27 in Sharm el Sheikh. So we parties agreed that there must be a new funding arrangement in para 2 actually, Sharm el Sheikh decision. Then in para 3, we established a fund in the context of funding arrangement. Colleagues, you need to see the context. We agreed funding arrangement first, then the fund in the context of funding arrangement. When we worked in Sharm el Sheikh, that our understanding was that funding arrangement would be new and innovative because this fund is different because this is not a project-based approach. It must be programmatic approach. Anyway, then this Sharm el Sheikh decision also established a transitional committee to work further to make recommendations that could be adopted by the parties at COP28. So throughout the year, transitional committee works with very strategic approach. Transitional committee met 5 times in this year and also organized 2 workshops to utilize the experts' brains to understand how to design these fund and funding arrangement. Maha, would you please go to the next slide? That would be more relevant. I think this, you can escape it. Can you go next slide? Yeah. This is the mandate for the transitional committee. Colleagues, that the transitional committee also established in Sharm el Sheikh to work 1 year and to make recommendations and to be adopted by the parties at COP28. As I was telling that they met 5 times, they organized 2 workshops, they organized 1 dialogue, and more than 10 technical papers produced by the Secretariat. So this is how the Transition Committee worked technically, also politically, very strategically. Finally, it was not so easy to agree on the recommendations. What are the key concerns for this Transition Committee is to agree on modalities, how funds should be established, how far should be operationalized, and how far should deliver. So institutional governance structure was the key issue. Second, also to identify the key elements related to funding arrangement, that is referred para 2 of the Sharm el-Sheikh decision. Finally, identifying an expanding source was very critical, because nobody wanted to provide funds. Even developed countries, they were not willing to fund for this fund, or not even emerging developing countries. Finally, to suggest some sort of coordination and complementary mechanisms, that was also critical for the transitional committee. But interestingly, yeah, colleagues, transitional committee supposed to meet 4 times, but the end of the fourth meeting in Aswan, Egypt, we got blocked, and we agreed not to make any recommendations. We are so upset, and finally we agreed for one more meeting, and then finally in Abu Dhabi in fifth meeting we agreed for the recommendations. Colleagues, just to say, as I am one of the lead negotiators for 46 least developing countries, so I know our group position and strategies. And since the recommendations made by the committee, then COP presidency started to consult with the different groups, how they can adopt this decision at the opening plenary. That was so strategic. That's why I do appreciate COP presidency to take some right strategic approach. So COP presidency consulted all the groups, even though there were some difficulties with some of the particular states. But before opening session, COP presidency managed all the parties to adopt this recommendation as it is at COP28 at the opening plenary. Maha, will you please go the next slide? Thank you, Maha. So finally, the COP presidency agreed at the opening session, and this is unprecedented. This is the first time any decision adopted at the opening session. We had to also face some legal challenges, but COP presidency and other parties actually we agreed it willingly. So COP presidency then started for pledges. This interestingly, this fund got immediate some supports, including the COP presidency, Arab Emirates, and some other developed countries, Germany, Denmark, and then also US. Even US funding is like 2.5 million, which is very much criticized. To some extent, Canada. Now, at this moment, there are $760 million are placed for this loss and damage fund. That is, I would say, very interesting and motivated to start. So now how to start? Actually, colleagues, loss and damage fund is not operationalized completely at COP28. But loss and damage provided guidance to operationalize this fund by the next 8 months from end of this COP. So during these 8 months, how this fund can be operationalized? We agreed at COP28 to form a board, and that board must be provided legal entity under any of the national countries. I'm very happy to let you know that President of Philippines already offered to host that board and agreed to provide that legal personality. That is an also advancement. So board with its legal personality then would work with the World Bank. Why World Bank? Because we agreed that we invited World Bank to operationalize this fund through an independent secretariat. So World Bank also invited to operationalize this fund as a financial intermediary fund, FIP. World Bank has its many more is FIP, but um, particularly I'm a negotiator from developing country. We are highly criticized why we agreed to host this secretariat or fund by the World Bank. But colleagues, we did not agree with a blank check, but we agreed 11 set of conditions that World Bank needs to meet. If World Bank can meet those conditions, what are the conditions? For example, if one country is not a member of the World Bank, how that country would access this fund? Even World Bank can give you sanctions on that country, how can access this fund? And how World Bank should ensure the direct budget support. Because we agreed this is a different fund. It's not a project based, it will take the trigger based soon after an event, money needs to be there to the communities. Second, it must be program based and that can support a government for a long-term basis based on their plans, programs, and policies through their direct budget support. So we agreed two terms of disburse mechanism, direct trigger-based and program-based. So how World Bank is going to operationalize this FIP inconsistent with the governing instrument we established for this fund. Now, main concern is that we established a fund. Then World Bank has own governing body, and World Bank has its own rules and regulations for financial intermediary fund. So, what would be the hierarchy? What would be the supremacy? What would be the coordination and synergies between these two boards? How to ensure this independent secretariat? That is the challenge. Next 8 months, board will going to address these challenges. They're gonna sit with the World Bank. If World Bank agree with to meet all the conditions, then we can operationalize this fund. If not, we can withdraw and look for another option to establish a standalone fund like Green Climate Fund. So at this moment, we are not hoping to go for that standalone mechanism. Hope board will work and World Bank needs to ensure the independence of this fund so that we can operationalize this fund next year. But at the same time, this 1 year is very important for national governments. Maha, can you give me the next slide, please? So, as I said, it at the global level, it will take 1 more year. Next COP will operationalize this fund. Then these 10, 12 months, what government can do actually? Because today I wanted to talk about the financing the ecosystem related loss and damage. If you look at this chart, this is the overall process for this fund. As I discussed about the disbursement process that is trigger based and program based, right? So now if we think about loss of ecology, loss of biodiversity, then it is associated with sudden onset event like cyclones and also slow onset processes like sea level rise. So how we can assess the nature of ecological loss and damage? So we need to use some tools and methodologies. I say the Executive Committee of the Warsaw International Mechanism is developing some tools, but at the same time, we can start with some primary tools to assess the loss and damage, particularly related to ecology and biodiversity. That would be a critical issue. And once we can do it, then we can submit a program, short-term, mid-term, long-term, to the board, and board can fund for the long time. Loss and damage is not project-based fund. It can provide you a program for a long time. For the slow onset process, particularly we agreed for the programmatic approach. So for ecological loss, biodiversity loss, we need to develop a critical evidence-based plans and programs. We can put that plans and programs as a state for direct budget support. At the same time, very important, these funds agreed to be accessed by the vulnerable communities directly. How this vulnerable community is going to access that fund, that is also very important challenge for the board. Colleagues, we mandated the board many responsibilities actually. We requested board to develop some eligibility criteria considering the vulnerabilities of different countries, and also we agreed minimum allocation, minimum percentage from the floor allocation for the least developing countries and small island developing countries. And in terms of the scope, we focused on the ongoing and exposed, for example, reconstruction, rehabilitation, restoration is particularly important for ecological loss and damage. For example, we know the sea surface temperature is reality, and that is causing harm to the those projects working area in the coastal zone. For example, in Bangladesh, Bangladesh is facing really very frequently the signal 3 and 4. It is very visible in Bangladesh, particularly March to November. And due to these signals, the coastal fisher folks cannot go for fishing at the sea. As a result, they are losing their income. As a result, they are losing their ability to support their children to go to school. So as a result, some of the fisher folks are already forced to displaced. So again, I do recall Pradeep's idea of vulnerability to visibility. That is, there is a need a transformation. There needs a transition. For this transitional period, I think the national government needs to act very carefully. Now they are turned because colleagues who are listening to me, I know long talk, listening long talk is not pleasurable sometimes, but I'm just telling you the stories from my real life as a negotiator. Now I'm really asking the vulnerable countries go back and to develop plans, programs, and national mechanism to address the loss and damage at the local level. Because at the international level, they are available now. Technical assistance available by the Santiago network, financial resources are available by the Loss and Damage Fund, and also as a policy executive committee is there. Even it's top down, but challenge is we need to translate all this process considering our vulnerabilities, considering our country context. So that's the challenge we need to take. At this moment, I think the academic institutions can play a very important role. Also, the academic, like Professor Pradeep, who already started to contribute to deal with the ecological and biodiversity loss and damage due to his project, that is vulnerability to visibility. So V2V is an excellent idea that can support actually vulnerable countries to develop their country level plans and programs and to submit fund programs to access those funds. So I'm telling nowadays always as loss and damage negotiator, as a transitional committee, now I am talking with many stakeholders to make them understand what we got actually from the COP28. I think we got that we need to work at the local level, national level now. There must be synergies and collaboration between academics, CSOs, NGOs, the policymakers, and also the youth participation is very important. So on this process, we would like to ensure the youth participation. With that said, may I request Maha for the next slide, please. Thanks, Maha. In terms of way forward, I think I already talked about these already. So finally, I would like to say access, and access with fair and just ways. Our access should be equitable. Our access should be in a fair manner so that the vulnerable countries can access this fund. So that is the first challenge for the board. Board is going to develop some vulnerability criteria For example, Bangladesh is moving towards developing countries, so they will lose some easy access as a least developing country. But vulnerability as a vulnerable country, we are top 10 countries in top 10 countries. So now it's quite important to assess the vulnerability. That's why at the same time, national level, I said already, assessment related to ecology and biodiversity is most critical. But in this space, academic institutions and academic like your role is really critical to start the assessment. And I said about tools and methodologies. I think that then again the academics should needs to take role to develop these tools and methodologies, considering the country context. As I already said, there is a need for short-term, mid-term, and long-term programs. Again and again, I'm telling this is the loss and damage fund, totally different from other existing fund because it needs to put money soon after an event like cyclone. It needs to put money to the national government to their national budget. It is not that like previous institution, you need to develop a project, you need to submit that project. If approved money will go, you will implement a project. That is for adaptation. For loss and damage, it must be trigger based. For loss and damage, it must be program based. For loss and damage, it must be direct budget support to the vulnerable countries. Those are the critical issues. However, there are 26 member board will be established end of this year, and they're gonna meet first within the last within the January of 2014 2024. So we are very much looking forward. Board will do holistic approach to ensure the independence of this fund from the World Bank. So with that said, Maha, can we go next slide? I would like to thank all of you from my bottom of heart because it is my favorite issue, loss and damage related to ecosystem and biodiversity. This picture shows our Sundarban from Bangladesh. This is the most biggest and beautiful mangrove forest in the world. Colleagues, if you come, you can, if you're lucky, you can might see a tiger. So even not, you will see many kinds of wild animals and wild bird species. So you all are welcome to Sundarban, Bangladesh. With that said, I would like to stop here, and I would be really happy to take your questions and to response. Professor Pradeep, over to you at this moment, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Hafij, for going into the details of the, background of loss and damage, because it is much talked about, and uh, there's a need for kind of, a better understanding of, not only what loss and damage is, but also, some of the ways in which it is being talked about, in terms of its implementation. And as you articulated, there's a lot of challenges in that implementation process. Having the fund is one thing, but to really use the fund in effective ways, and with a focus on vulnerable communities is a big task, and which we hear from you that is going to happen in the next several months in terms of the board being formed and money being spent through development of programs and all. So I would now look and see if there are questions from our viewers, and I'm going to read those questions. As of now, I don't see any questions from the viewers, but in the meantime, if I may just start the discussion by asking you one particular question, which is about the point you made in terms of the direct access of vulnerable communities to the fund itself. Uh, and as of now, there is no framework within which this direct access could take place. So, can you provide some initial thoughts about what this direct access might look like, because in the past experience we have seen that, it's absolutely problematic when it comes to vulnerable communities directly, having a say in the decision making process itself. So can you clarify a little bit in terms of what is the thought at the loss and damage, negotiation level in terms of, this direct access?
Yeah, Professor Pradeep, that was, I would say, most innovative agreed decision at COP28. But Professor Pradeep and colleagues, the civil societies are also playing very important role in this process. They create, this is Loss and Damage Fund was established, to be honest, very, very much influenced by the civil society and media. So basically, the civil society proposed for this community direct access process. So the idea to access this fund by the vulnerable community is conceptually beautiful. Now you raise the real question actually, how to develop the modalities then that a vulnerable community can access this fund. Okay, this is still a question for the policymakers. Board is going to deliver this question. We transitional committee agreed the idea. We put forward it to the board. But as I was telling that I'm a community lawyer, let me explain or try to give some idea how to design this mechanism. So basically, Prateep, at the local level, community-based organizations are there, and I was involved with community-based fisheries management for many years. And as a legal organization, Bela, we tried to provide their legal entity. You will find many CVOs, even in the coastal zone in Coxbazar or other coastal zone in Bangladesh. They have the legal entity. So if a community-based organization, it has is legal entity, it can seek fund anywhere. So now this is the starting point to think about the CVOs, community-based organizations. Then who gonna support them to write their proposal, develop their programs? That's why V2V is there. So you need to support them technically to come up the idea to develop the application process of this. At the same time, we need to talk about the international level. Hey, look, these CVOs are not in a position to develop their plans. They cannot access it. Can you make it easy access, so that they can also take some sort of top-down approach with government to identify relevant CVOs, and they can put some money to an organ to government. Government every year can identify the CVOs they can allocate. Because maybe at international level, it would be difficult to identify the CVOs. But in the loss and damage process, there is a contact point at the national level. That contact point can identify the relevant CVOs through a process. CVOs can get access the fund directly. Do you agree with me, Professor? Because I know you know better than me. So
No,
then
it's
it's a
not. No,
preliminary
you
idea.
are the expert. I mean, you are in the thick of things. You are, not only negotiating but also thinking in terms of, now that there is the fund is really happening. There is fund in the fund. If I may say that way. Now the ways of working it out, is necessary. I hear one thing that you said is about there are the role for various other agencies and institutions, and of course, projects and and networks like V2B and others, several others, is crucial because and that fits into the articulation that we make in terms of capacity development and co-creation and co-working, and collaboratively doing things. So there is a need for working collaboratively in creating these frameworks whereby there is a direct access by communities to the loss and damage fund and to the loss and damage process. access to the process is very, very important. So I recognize that, so there is that need. But other than that, there is a lot that needs to be created and articulated in the next several months, before these things could happen, within the, given international politics and governance structures that are in place, So thank you for answering that. So I have now questions from the audience, so I'll read it now. So the first question is from Momita Dasgupta, and Momita is asking, thank you for this excellent discussion. Do you think that existing disaster management frameworks can be consolidated with the climate change management frameworks to address loss and damage?
Shall I go to respond this question, or shall we take one more?
Yeah, so go with this, and then I'll read the next one, which is a link
Okay.
to this one. Yes.
Thanks, Bhavita. It's a good question. As I said earlier, that the fund and funding arrangement, there are two aspects. We agreed fund at Sharm el-Sheikh with an understanding for innovative funding arrangement. But my friend, the transitional committee member from the developed countries, the way they interpreted this funding arrangement, that shocked us. They said existing funding arrangements are quite good enough, that needs to be enhanced. I mean, the funds related to disaster risk management, fund related to humanitarian assistance are there. Also, some other initiative like Global Shield are there. Those are enough for loss and damage fund. But we, the TC members from the developing countries, we did not agree. So we tried to establish this fund as a standalone that can be mobilized, that can mobilize the fund from different sources, but they can also collaborate with existing funding arrangements. For example, certain onset events, you need some support, humanitarian assistance also. Now, challenge is how to develop a coordinated arrangement. Then you can access the fund at the same time. You can utilize the existing humanitarian and disaster risk management related funds. So then again, I'm telling you this now up to the national governments to act and develop their own structures. So last 30 years, we negotiated at the UNFCCC level. That is good enough. Now we need to act to protect our vulnerable citizens. So I hope it makes sense for fund and funding arrangements, Momita.
That answers the second part of the question as well, with regard to the role of national government and all. Um, the other question is about the mention in terms of loss and damage related to ecology and biodiversity. How loss and damage is equipped to address the social and economic issues is the other question.
Okay, this is also an interesting question. Loss and damage, that is, it involves socio-ecological perspective. Now, you try to take the bottom-up approach. Your ecosystems is supporting you. Your ecosystems create your culture, support your livelihood. Ultimately, this makes your societal structure. Our societal structure mostly based on the ecosystem, geographical specificities. So you see, the ecology is the heart that shape up your societal structure, societal norms. Then you think about socio-economic. Then to some extent, your economic system also built on this socio-ecological system. So you see, community specificity is very, very important. So of course we cannot take silo approach. We need to take a holistic approach. We need to address the loss and damage related to ecological, socio-economic. Also another term is socio-legal. Socio-legal is very important because you need to give all these institutions mandate through your legal instrument. If there is no legal mandate for the relevant stakeholders, including institutions, they would not perform right way. There must be a compliance approach. So then needs to be a pressurized governance system. So we cannot act silo. That's a good question. We need to take socio-legal, socio-economic, finally socio-ecosystem-based approach. So, Sapati, over to you.
And there is enough momentum in terms of thinking uh, in terms of a more holistic approach, or more integrated approach, that includes all aspects of community, life and all. I don't see any more questions, Hafiz, but before we end, if you can also, refocus, on the aspect of the role of different stakeholders. You talked about the need for, community being at the forefront, because they take the brunt of climate change impacts, directly. But at the same time, there are multiple stakeholders, that play crucial roles. Within the global governance for loss and damage, that you articulated, what are some of the positive, directions that are emerging in terms of, making this process a really collaborative process, thereby, you know, multiple stakeholders or key actors are involved in this process itself, and it is not hijacked, by certain dominant actors itself. So, what is the mechanism within the loss and damage transitional committee and the board that is coming up to ensure that this is a more collaborative process? Because, as I mentioned, there is a lot of focus in our work in terms of co-creation and co-production of knowledge and working together on various aspects of community strengthening. So, can you outline a little bit of that prospect within the current process of loss and damage?
Professor Pudhi, it's a good point actually. In terms of collaborative approach, we now all we agreed there is a need for multi-actor partnerships. But what is this multi-actor partnership for me? Let me explain. As I said, your ecosystems also gives structure for your society. So then again, ecosystem is the heart. Now, who is the agent for ecosystem? Is of course the community. Those are closely linked with this ecosystem ecology. So community is the first agent for this multi-partner actorship because community knows better their ecosystem and what are the damage, how to address those with their traditional knowledge. So then now community is not enough because climate change is giving so uncertainty. Community is sometimes, as I work at the community level, they express really their frustration to understand the nature and how it is changing. It's very critical. Then we need some academic support. I think researcher, academics, they are taking some innovative action research that ensure the participation of the community. So, and then second stake, I would say the academic and researchers. They need to address the scientific issues in line with the IPCC latest reports. Then, of course, we need NGOs, CSOs. They are supporting directly these vulnerable communities. NGOs are also now involved with the research. They are taking evidence-based approach based on their research. They make campaign and also some advocacy works. So NGOC is, so for me, very important actor or stakeholder in this field. Finally, I would say policymakers, of course. Now, the national policymakers are quite important because our policymakers are now involved with the international policy making process through the negotiation process. So we are going for negotiation, not only contributing Pradeep, to the international lawmaking process. At the same time, we bring back the knowledge and information and what are the needs at the national level. So our policymakers, for example, Bangladesh delegation, we went there 33 people. Now we got back. Now we need to act at the national level in collaboration with the policymakers and other stakeholders. So I think negotiators are now very important actor because you need to translate your policies from global to national level. So that's why again what I said, socio-ecological, socio-economic, socio-legal. So all these approaches have their own actors. Now time to take some very coordinated, integrated approach, but that is not so easy. Professor Pradeep, coordination gap is a challenge not only the least developing countries, even developed countries like Canada, even like UN agencies, there is no coordination. Even UN people are always criticize themselves. There is no coordination. So coordination, there is a gap. But it is easier to establish coordination at the national level, local level, instead of global level. So we need to take the bottom-up approach. We then again can start with the CVOs, community-based organizations. I thank you, Professor Putu.
That's great. With those reflections, I would like to bring it to an end. I don't see any more questions from the YouTube audience. But thank you very much. Hafij, I know you're doing great work. You are in the thick of things in terms of the loss and damage, and there is a lot of advice that you have given in the past, and you continue to be involved in. And especially your focus on the community is very encouraging for us. And I think we'll continue this discussion not only with you but also many other people that are involved in this process, and we look forward to that. And thank you once again, and thanks to everyone who joined and asked good questions. And these are things that will continue to be discussed, because there is no quick fix or there is no quick answers to these questions, because things are emerging still. And I will hear more as we go, and we'll discuss more. And thank you everyone. And please stay tuned. We'll be tweeting, and then watch for the next webinar in January, the last Friday of January. That would be posted on our website, which is www.b2bglobalpartnership.org. So we look forward to having you once again in January. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, all of you. Bye bye.